This is The Search for the Sound. I'm Ross Holmes.
My name is Jason Anick.
And today we're joined by our dear friend, violin guru, fiddle composition master, Jeremy Kittel, all the way from Brooklyn, New York. Thank you for joining us, Jeremy.
Guys, it's great to see you. Thanks for having me.
We've missed seeing everybody out on the road over the pandemic, and it's so wonderful to see your face. How have you been navigating through the past year?
I think I probably pride myself a little bit on being flexible, adaptable, and all of that. And so been trying to make the most of it, of course. And yeah, I can't complain, let's put it that way. So a lot of things that I've been wanting to get to for a while, I've been getting to, from practicing to writing to all sorts of different things, organizational things and everything in between. So yeah.
Well, before we dive into all the questions we've got and the conversation we'll have, let's listen to a clip. Lay it out for us. What are we going to hear?
Okay, we're going to hear a clip of my tune Chrysalis, which I wrote for my group Kittel & Co. And it's a string band, hammer dulcimer, guitar, mandolin, cello, and fiddle. And so my idea with this tune was to write like a really layered thing that just keeps on kind of shifting and changing, but in the string band setting. And so that's what came out. And it was also, luckily enough, nominated for a Grammy for the instrumental composition, which was an awesome, awesome honor. And yep, Chrysalis.
Well, it sounds absolutely fantastic. I've heard this a number of times. Such an incredible arrangement, composition, and instrumentation, and all you guys are just at the top of your game. I'm really curious about your process. As someone who composes and arranges too, I'm always so curious about just like your process of arranging a piece like this. It's so intricate.
Totally, yeah. So this one was really interesting. It took a while to come into its shape, so its final shape for sure. The basic process for most of the tunes on that album that's from, which is called Whorls, was that I would write, in some cases, a whole demo, often, but like just layering things, simple guitar, fiddle, and doing more or less counterpoint depending on the particular tune, more or less of the arrangement. For some of the other tracks like Pando or Olmsted that are other tracks in that album, it was more the complete demo. And this one actually was interesting because I had these different elements and then worked with the band. We started getting them up. And there was a jam session that also was really awesome because we were taking some of those things and then playing around with them in different ways. And this one was a little bit more interactive in that way of than those things that we'd interacted with ending up being part of the arrangement or inspiring different parts. So then I would go back and write things from there, do more sectional work, counterpoint, and things like that. Go back again, et cetera, et cetera. Because in that band, nobody, or not nobody, but I'd say the majority of us don't read music. I do because, growing up playing violin, fiddle, a little bit less, but obviously violin, like reading a lot of music and everything. But most of the guys in that band play all by ear. And so even if I wrote some things down, like in the case of we do this one that's a Bach arrangement.
Hmm.
That's like very written out in terms of the counterpoint. But then I still, would send a demo to the dulcimer player Simon and amazing musicians I'm so honored to get to work with and to play with. But not everybody, again, reads. So it was that kind of organic, mixed process all throughout.
What are your earliest memories of playing the fiddle? Of course, you mentioned just now, playing classical violin, of course, all of your fiddling. How did you get into this?
Well, I mean, knew somebody who knew somebody. So I grew up in Michigan, and great area for music, Southeast Michigan. Like it's a college town, Ann Arbor. I grew up in a kind of officially in a small town just south of there, Saline, and there were kind of multiple angles for me to get into all of it because there was a Irish session in town. There were Irish players in the Detroit area. I mean, there was lots of different kinds of styles of music, and it was really that I had the great support of my parents, especially my chauffeur mom, who when I was a kid would drive me around everywhere. That she thought I might appreciate, and also places that I wanted to go. And so she would drop me off Wednesday nights, for example, at the Arbor Brewing Company for an old time jam. Or actually, that was the Irish jam. I didn't know it's like a single, maybe two tunes. And I got like boot camp of like ear training because I was just like, and it was a smoky bar. That's how it was back then, right? And so smoky bar, mom would go get a pint, bless her heart. God knows she deserved it. And she'd keep a watchful eye, but I was like 11 and I'm like playing and learning tunes. And I tell you what, it was the best ear training because by the time I got to college, to like undergrad and everything for ear training, I could pass out of, at least the first year and everything of all that stuff because I'd done that boot camp of learning melodies on the fly because, otherwise, what are you going to do? You don't know any of them, so you got to learn them. Yeah.
Hmm.
So
Awesome. Yeah.
that was one kind of entry point. But then also there were many different ones. Also, there was a Celine program run by my dear friend and the amazing educator and innovator Bob Phillips, and he was doing a lot of really interesting things in the lab with his students and really supportive things. So we were improvising like in middle school and high school, and there was a fiddling group I was part of as well, the Celine Fiddlers, and so there was that, and I was just obsessed at some point. I think at some point I just heard Martin Hayes and Solis and these Irish, and Alistair Fraser, Liz Carroll, these Irish Scottish groups. That just like lit me on fire. And then after that, you'd think maybe I would learn like old time or bluegrass or something like that. But then it was like jazz. So it was like a style of music where there's almost no crossover audience. But I didn't care. I was way into it. So then went into like Miles Davis, Coltrane were my heroes, Branford Marsalis, and all these kinds of musicians from there. So that hopefully paints a little bit of a picture without me going on too long, which actually too late I did. But there you go.
And of course, oh, that's so great to hear. And of course, like a lot of us string players connected through camps as well. I think the first time we met Jeremy was at the Tennessee Mark O'Connor camp many moons ago.
That's
And
another
yeah,
totally really important thing for me personally. And yeah, exactly. Like where would we have met? We probably would have met at a gig otherwise, but we wouldn't have had as much time to hang as like those camps really afford. But sorry to interrupt.
yeah, and being, of course, like being immersed in so many different traditions, and going to seeing a lot of other players. At least for me, like it was so important to see other violinists like improvising and in many different traditions. But of course, for me, being obsessed with jazz and just seeing other violinists doing it, because in my regional community, no one was doing it. And I don't know if that was the same for you. I was always hanging out with horn players, and so these camps were so important to be able to hang out with you. And I know that same year there was like Alex Hargraves was there, and Mike Barnett. There was a lot of people, Dare Anger and Christian House, Billy Contreras, and just so it was just so inspiring. So I'd be curious, like, your involvement with those camps and how important those were to kind of broaden
Absolutely.
everything.
those were incredibly important, and still are to some degree. But at that time, I just wanted to be at those camps all the time and soaking up as much as I could, because where else are you going to get to hang out with Mark O'Connor or Alistair Fraser or Daryl Anger or all these amazing teachers? Or I really enjoy teaching now quite a bit, and I was turning some students on to Claude Fiddler Williams, the great jazz violinist, and finding these old videos. I got to meet Claude when he was in his 90s, I think, and play with him these camps, which was so awesome. And then looking back at his, he was like really playing in his like maybe 50s, 60s. Like I only knew 90s Claude, but man, he really smoked like in that kind of way. But I wouldn't have known about him necessarily. Like he's kind of, hopefully gets more recognition and everything. But I think those for the teaching, like getting to connect with all the other, well, all the teachers, and then eventually I was fortunate enough to be teaching at them, but also the other players. I mean, good gosh, like the other students, and like these are some of my dearest friends to this day, and most influential musical connections. West Coast friends too, Tashina and Tristan Clare, big shout out. They've been organizing things for years, where it's all about the connection and the community, and coming away and being changed after a week. So really a big part of my life for sure.
Yeah, it's amazing to see how many of our friends who attended camp have actually gone on to pursue this career. And man, I would venture a guess probably a quarter of the people I remember attending camp have pursued music either professionally or to some degree. Their names are out there still doing it. And it's what an amazing conduit for generations to continue on. I think the thing that I remember so vividly about camp, everybody had the same medium. Everybody's instruments were so completely different, and the sound, Vassar Clemens might be playing, and Johnny Gimbel walks over and Vassar hands him his fiddle, and it doesn't sound like Gimbel. It sounds still like Vassar, but it's Gimbel playing. And that was really the first time for me where I was hit in the face truly with all of the differences in sound of these instruments and what it meant to each of these players. And of course, having Fred Carpenter there at camp with all these fiddles and John Cooper there building instruments, it wasn't only the immersion into the genres and the styles of playing, but the actual fiddle itself. I mean, it was truly a camp where you could watch an instrument being built, as well as connecting with these peers who are now our friends, these heroes, these teachers, and these kids who we make music with. What an amazing thing. What, at the time you were attending camp, what instrument were you playing?
I was probably playing this Czech fiddle for most of that I had at the time. I still have it actually, by Miroslav Komar, Komar meaning mosquito. And it was, basically it was the best college instrument that I could really afford at the time. Like I come from a middle class family, like my dad and mom grew up in themselves, in that kind of way. And there was not a feeling of luxury or that we were just going to go out and buy some expensive instrument or anything like that. So I would go for in busk, like at the farmer's market and stuff, to buy instruments, pay for things and whatnot. And the people were very generous in helping make that happen for sure. So that was the instrument, the Komar, that I bought for college, and I still enjoy it. But at some point, I realized that I really needed something that had a bit more depth for the next phase of my career in the sound. I'd be in the studio, and I'd be. It has an incredible sweetness to it, but it would be kind of missing a lot of the lower end. So missing, I'd always be boosting 300 hertz and finding a way to do that. Trying to find a way that didn't sound like it was boosted, using a Pultec simulator or something to get that low end, which can be a really nice way to do it on a violin. But eventually, I had to find something else.
Led you where? Dun, dun,
Yes,
dun.
and what is this something else?
So I was looking. I actually was delighted to come on the show because I did my own search for this sound, like where I was so focused on it. Of course, we're always searching like throughout our careers, and like the sound is like probably what brings us as like humanity to these instruments, right? And in so many different ways, as you said, Ross, so many different styles. But So in 2010, I think I found this guy, which is a fiddle by Vladek Štapka. Vladek is a wonderful maker. He's in Chicago. He goes by Walter. And I found this in at Williams Fine Violins
Mm.
in Nashville, where you are, Ross.
Yeah.
And it was the favorite fiddle in the shop, so everybody would play it when they had, there were any customers around. They would like sneak over and go and play this fiddle. And there was this one and another one that were both really good there. And it had exactly, it definitely, I knew at the beginning, it definitely had the thing that I had, kind of started out looking for, which was more that low end and I can just play a little bit. So it's like, it has, for sure more of that fundamental range than my other one, which is locked away in a case somewhere. But yeah.
Awesome. What about like you want to play a little tune or a little improv or whatever you feel comfortable with, just low key?
Sure, yeah. I'll just improvise a little bit. So it's got like
Yeah.
certainly thanks. Yeah, it's got it definitely was the best thing that I could find in like many months in its price range, and that became clear the more and more that I looked at the time, and so it became abundantly clear that it was the right choice at the time and everything.
Here's something that is super interesting. So I've you know I always thought of like hear you and can you're like to me one of the players that I can someone could throw something on and I'd say, oh, that's Jeremy, that's one note. I can always recognize your style in one note. But I could also, your voice transcended the instrument, which but it's so interesting to think about, right? Like I could hear an old recording of you and be like, that's Jeremy. I can hear a new recording of you and be like, that's Jeremy. Different instruments. And it's kind of interesting how we always put our voice into the instrument, but it just sounds like it just became a Jeremy 2.0. It's like, okay, it just became a more whole version of yourself of what you're looking for. Is that how you kind of see it? Is like just kind of like upgraded, or do you think it was a complete tonal shift in your head that you said like you had like this is what I like you said you wanted deeper, you wanted more low end, more supported sound, but do you feel like it still had a similar voice that you were looking for?
That's a great question. So I think on the sound aspect, I think that's a wonderful observation, and I think maybe it goes to something truly deep and spiritual about us. I would even posit to say, I think I remember maybe Itzhak Perlman talking about this, just like how people have certain sounds that just kind of come out in certain ways, and um, I do think there's something really amazing about that. I think it probably speaks to the sounds we're attracted to, the vibrations, the certainly kind of the moves, in terms of how we use pitch and everything. But that's vibration as well, right? So it goes beyond like any analysis of it to literally, I mean, man, the sound is like it's pulling, it pulls our heartstrings, it changes our mood, our emotions, our life, with the sound of music. And so maybe there's something deeply personal about that, but that's a bit of an open-ended question for me. With this violin, I knew that it would. I literally needed it for a gig because I was in town doing my first strings job, where I was doing viola and violin, and it was for Abigail Washburn, whom
Mm.
you guys probably both know, and it was kind of, it seemed like I needed a better instrument for it. or at least an instrument that had that depth of the sound and the tone and everything. And so that, I rented it actually at first. That's right. I rented it for a month, and it did that. I I will be honest, like there may be another fiddle at some point. I feel a little guilty talking about him, and I don't actually think of her as a her. But I I still think about other other violins, and in fact, I thought recently about, yeah, this is getting interesting. Thought about searching maybe even sooner than I thought, because there's certain things that um, my we were talking just a bit before this. So I have my viola here, and there's certain things that some instruments do where I feel like they put the listener at ease right off the bat, just with sound. Viola might be a little more inclined to do that anyway, right? It's like the cello; it's a little lower pitched. It's more soothing, perhaps, in those kinds of ways. But I'll go to a session sometimes. I'll play some violin overdubs, and then I'll be like, I also have this viola here. You want me to play any of that? And I'm like, oh yeah, sure, I guess so. And I'll play a bit, and they're like, that's we want more of that. So, I kind of want to get. I don't think I would ever part with this fiddle. I would probably sell the Komar so that it gets used at least, and then have this be my second. But this viola here, I'll just reach over and grab it. Is actually much larger than I thought I would want to procure in terms of a viola, but I just really fell in love with the sound. It's also from Chicago, and it has a lot of nice,
It really speaks
warm.
too. Yeah.
Yeah, and it speaks pretty well too. Um, yeah,
I
and
don't
of
think that.
course,
Oh,
go
I
ahead.
was just gonna say I don't think you should never feel bad. Like the search is forever. You can still have an instrument. I've like I've always thought you have to find one instrument and that's it forever. And for a lot of people, that like for practical reasons, that is it. That and or they are forever just it has to be that and they love it and it's okay. But I know with Ross and I both have multiple violins around. I'll grab one that this is does this for me. Like I still feel like it sounds like me, but it does like it has that lower end. This one is better for recording. This one's but
Totally,
uh,
yeah.
well like quality has to be there, but I do find different shades, different hues, um, without feeling like you're kind of cheating on one or the other.
Yeah, let's lose that whole
Yeah.
metaphor completely. It actually doesn't make any sense, and
Yeah.
it's fraught territory. We're leaving that one behind. But yeah, on that note, like, yeah, I was writing something this morning where I know it's for my band, and I know when we ever go down to a small configuration, it's like somebody's got to go below 220 hertz or 200 hertz. And, we only have in our trio configuration that we sometimes do with my band, basically we need the octave pedal on the mandolin or the fiddle to do that. Long way of saying a five string, my dream instrument might really be a five string that has like the most amazing sound,
Mm.
you could ever think of, and also is really playable and all that.
You made a really interesting point earlier. It just keeps swirling around my mind about allowing the audience to initially, when the bow strikes the string at first, feel a sense of ease. And I think that's a really, really insightful statement that you made. I think very often players forget when we're trying out instruments, particularly when a friend of ours hands us a fiddle and says, hey, I just got this, check it out and play it. We immediately go to the things that our ears are drawn to, the power of the instrument, how equitable is the sound from low to high, all of these factors. But I admit, I guess I've never really, in all of the shops and fiddles that I've tried, I haven't invested enough thought into what it will be like for the audience to hear what's coming out of the instrument. I know for me, my particular instrument, it's an old French fiddle, and I love it. I hit a wall with it a long time ago, but I'm so comfortable on it that when I perform on the instrument, record, I know that ease is being translated. And though it's not pushing me the way that I feel like I should be pushed with an instrument right now, that level of comfort is still, it elicits such automatic and genuine, authentic response, emotive response out of our hands that surely in your quest to find a new instrument at some point in time, that consideration will lay in the forefront of your process for how you analyze that, the next layer of sound that you're seeking in an instrument.
For sure, yeah. Taking everything that I've experienced with this one and the other instruments that I've had, and yeah, absolutely finding. I mean, I think of the violin is a great communicator, right? It's like I know. I think both of you guys. I know I'm really drawn to all of the shades of expression, really all the shades of humanity and our emotions that you can communicate with music and communicate with a violin. You know, often with accompaniment and all that, unless you're maybe playing the chaconne or whatever. But really, the full range of emotion is available in some way. And to me, I really think a lot of the time about how it correlates to just how we are programmed, you could say, as humans, and how we react to tones, how we hear. We hear in this certain, you know, wavelength of tones and everything. And it's all related to speech, I think, uh, related to consonants with the articulation, and vowels, of course, with the tone. And so I think of that as, you know, really just kind of primary, primal, even, and elementary in terms of elemental. I'm abridging the words in terms of, you know, getting that kind of like more of a soft, um, gentle, welcoming sound where it's like, come into this world here, and versus the sternness of something, you know, where you're really, there's something just powerful about that. It would be the same if it was speech or music. So I think that's part of the reason uh, I would argue that violin fiddle has been adopted by like every culture practically in the world. It's so flexible in those ways.
And so
Absolutely.
portable.
Yeah,
Hmm.
it's so portable.
Let me ask another question regarding our actual gear. You have such command over your bow, and that's a thing that I think most players have taken serious note of since you've been on the scene, since you were a kid. What bow are you playing currently, and how do you weigh the scales between the tone that you're trying to come out of, you know, force out of your violin in your left hand, combined with your actual bow and your feelings on bowing in general?
Yeah. So when I was doing that deep dive into gear back then, you know, back in maybe 10 years ago, did a big bow search. And my dear friend and I, we went to Ifshin in the Bay Area, California, and tried out like all of their bows. And we did blind listening tests to
Hmm.
see, are these really priced well? Does this make any sense at all? And to our shock, they were priced very well for the sound quality and playability. And so clearly somebody really was doing a great job with that over there. Because we just, you know, we would keep on being surprised again. You know, I actually have been playing like all my life, but I don't think I could tell you why certain bows sound different, but they so do, as we know. And yeah, just realized that the sound really changed so much. So we ended up really liking. Actually, to be honest, there were these coda bows that had amazing articulation. We found the coda bows were really awesome for the articulation, and that they, at least in the sample we tried, beat out a lot of wood bows that were more expensive for tone even. But then after a certain point, we found that the wood bows would start to just sound better tone wise. Um, but there was one bow that had a lot of, again, low end to it that we really liked, and then ended up finding this one. that even beat that favorite out and wasn't even from Ifshin, as chance would have it. It was by Doug Ragus, who's a fellow
Oh
Michigan
yeah.
and great maker, and just really liked the tone of it. And so actually, yeah, really started using it a lot more in the last few years. It's become the main bow. And I kind of feel like you can figure out almost any bow, the more you play it over time. And that's certainly been the case with this one.
Yeah, and it's also a marriage between the instruments, and it's great. I think it's so important for all our listeners to know that you got to try as many as you can, various price ranges, carbon fiber, wood, German, French. Try as much as you can, and have someone else there listening for the effect, what it does to your instrument, what it does, like you said, on the humanity side. How are they feeling it? Is it doing something? Is it adding something? That's so important. Um, I know I'll have a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun as well to kind of to try them and get your hands on some amazing bows. And I've actually played a few of his bows. They're great.
Nice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, amazing bows. I've had a few of his on trial over the years, and I never pulled the trigger on them. But there's one that I still think about a lot, because I think I ended up having it on trial when I did a recording years back, and so it is there permanently on a recording. Yeah, he's a great maker. He's a fantastic maker. So that's awesome. That's great that you found him.
I keep on hoping that um, somebody in my family will get into genealogy and discover that I'm actually the rightful heir to Kittel, who is the maker of, I think,
Ah,
like the
yes.
expensive bows. I can't. Do you guys remember his first name? This guy Kittel,
Yeah,
but
Russian. Yeah, exactly.
and that suddenly,
I don't know if you look Russian, but
knock
maybe
on
you
the door.
are.
I don't look it. Get a knock on the door, and somebody will come with bearing gifts of his fine bows. But until then, I'm very happy with the red goose for sure.
Have you ever tried a Kittle bow?
I haven't. Have you guys?
You have yeah, of course you have,
Yeah,
Ross.
yeah. I've played several. They're really fantastic. In fact, one in particular was at Darnton and Hirsch Violin Shop in Chicago, and very often with these bows, I think it's a safe thing with bows and instruments to, yes, we need to consider price when we're thinking about buying an instrument, but very often we become discouraged when we see the price of something. We think it's going to have X value of sound. It's going to play a certain way. Very often in these blind tests, as you mentioned, Jeremy, you wind up finding something that fits your hands and fits your ears, suits your ears in a much more genuine manner, and it could be thousands cheaper. But there's that hang up about the difference between tone and playability and value, provenance, pedigree of these things. So that to say, the Kittel bows that I've played have all been wonderful. There was one in particular in Chicago that was a gold mounted tortoiseshell bow that was, pushing a couple $100,000, and it was fantastic. But at that point in time, you're buying history. You're not buying playability. I don't believe. I think that there are micro levels that are noticeable up to 20, $30,000, but after that it's very hard to find unless your hands are just so dialed in to find that hot rod machine. I think you can find that at a lesser expense. And two, again, the hunt for it is quite a fun adventure. And it just happens, man, where you're from is truly one of the hotbeds of violin making in the world, not just America, but
Reviewed Curtin recently, which is super cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
brilliant makers that come through Ann Arbor. Did you have experiences with any of these crafters when you were a kid? Did you ever pop into their shops and nerd out with them?
Not a whole lot, to be honest. Am I was always more geared, no pun intended, not being a gearhead, but to kind of a ridiculous degree where it would always be like, okay, I really need to work on my setup. I'm practicing a lot, but let's work on my setup a bit. That would really help, So I didn't. I was more just busy with that. I don't think that I did. I would love to do that. I've always had this idea of going and volunteering at a shop sometime to learn a lot of the basics, which would be a fun thing to do. I'm curious if you guys, if I can bring a little thing up, actually a big thing, if you guys have talked about space very much, like the room or the setting, obviously, then you can talk about mics and you can talk about all these different things that go into sound. But I find that maybe space or the creation of space is to me a vital part of what I often enjoy. Have you talked about that much in these conversations yet?
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that right before you hopped on. We were talking about strings and talking specifically about the effect of strings that Jason's trying out right now. In my opinions, having tried this particular set in the past, super flexibles, and briefly talking about, you know, how bluegrass players love this particular set of strings because it cuts right off the instrument, but they do die out at a certain distance. And when you're trying to fill a hall or play on top of a large ensemble, it's not necessarily the right thing. So that also comes back to certainly the bow that we're using, the setup on the instrument. Is it more for projection or is it more for mic compatibility? All these factors, they really are critical. What are your thoughts, Jason?
Yeah, well, I think we've all been in so many different situations over the years in different rooms where the same instrument, one, we just feel like $1,000,000, right? It's the sound's going out. It's doing something magical to the room. The room is doing something magical to the sound. And we've also been in rooms where it seems to suck all of the energy and all the life force out, and you just feel like, is this like what's going on? I mean, we've been in all those different rooms, and it could be the same instrument, our same, we of course hear a lot closer playing right next to us, but we still hear the room, we still feel the room, and it's such an important part of it for sure. The acoustics of the space and how they interact is it's extremely important for sure. And I think that's why it's so valuable. Like we watched in your first video, we saw that's such an amazing space, and you want to have a space that you feel like you can really be comfortable, you can and it inspires you too.
I would always get in trouble in college for practicing in the stairwells and the bathrooms.
I love staircases.
I couldn't get the recital hall, but I could be
I,
bold enough to practice.
I'm sure the practice rooms, as they are everywhere, just kind of so uninspiring to practice in.
Yeah, I mean, I've thought, I mean, it's such a big part of whether I enjoy both playing and also listening to the music, and at least some reverberation is so important to pretty much every recording I can think of that I like. It's not just like you don't go into like a drum. Almost nobody goes into like a drum ISO booth. It's completely padded with one mono mic and like says that's my fiddle sound. I'm sure somebody has done it or will do it, and it'll be like the coolest thing ever. But I always found just it was such an important part of the entire experience of playing a string instrument and appreciating one, even if it's subtle. I would sometimes recording, if I had carpet underneath me, I would put a block of wood or like like basically just so that I would have that first early reflection from the floor is I think what was happening. And it would just make the sound just like a little bit sweeter, even though it didn't sound like a reflection. It wasn't distinguishable because it was, too short and everything. But like even those kind of reflections that are hard to distinguish at all, I think are important. And then obviously, depending on the musical style, and how much space you're trying to fill in a situation. I just wanted to mention that because I feel like it's such an important part. I'll even like if I'm writing, I find I write differently if I put on just a little bit of verb, unless I'm in some amazing room. But we don't always have the Taj Mahal to record and work in and everything. And so that can be inspiring to me too.
It's an interesting point because I've found, particularly over the pandemic, I'm spoiled. I have a really big living room space with like 20-foot tall ceilings. So it's very live, and it's a great place to practice, except when everybody else is in the house and it's chaos and kids and dogs. And it's hard to really dive into the depths that I would like. But I've found that particularly over the pandemic, my space here is extremely dead and it's uninspiring tonally to practice in. But investing the time to try to attempt as beautiful a sound, as pure a sound in a relatively uninspiring space has really helped to my confidence stepping into the living room space and feeling like I'm actually filling the sound of the room with more confidence and with more focus on that tonal property.
That makes a lot of sense. I think that's a great point and a great exercise. Can you be inspired and be confident in the tone you're making, given that you're going to hear it without much, help? Because it is, at some degree, it can be help, and it occasionally can be a crutch, and it's good to do. I would say probably both ways. Yeah,
It's like,
that's
yeah,
awesome.
it could be like a reality check too, and yeah, no, it's interesting. I think if you are playing in a more dead space, as long as it's not like sucking up the sound, if it's more just neutral, then I guess you are getting a little bit more of the direct sound. And if you can craft that, there's a lot to learn there for sure.
Yeah,
And it is interesting the approach that a lot of recording engineers take. And I say this because we've all had many hours behind microphones. The approach that some engineers take is that of space, and some is that of direct sound. And it's interesting, the approach that different engineers in particular will find their lane for how they like recording the violin, recording the fiddle. And that's kind of what they go to for their setup. And you mentioned, the depressing drum closet here in Nashville. Man, I can't tell you how many overdubs I have made in a dead vocal booth or drum closet. And when you put on cans and you've got reverb, it sounds nice. But if you pop an ear off to find a little bit more authenticity in your pitch, man, it's this weird, like, the meeting of the different sediment of verb and dry all at the same time. It's an uncomfortable place to be. So you want to find that comfort zone, all still the while feeling like you're connecting to your instrument, because as you know, practicing verb, there's now a middleman between you and the instrument, and that's your headphones. And it can change how we approach the feel of these things. So yeah, space is, I think it's vital to how we are inspired and how we approach the next phase of our playing.
yeah, that's a great point. That even when you do take that dry sound, because I was thinking of a couple that I've recorded in booths. There's one I recorded a bunch of stuff in a booth, but it was layered, and then the producer, this awesome producer named Tucker Martine, he took that, and it was supposed to be just string overdubs, but he made it this whole other track. And even though, as you're saying, you're right, because like it was a dry room, but he made it into this ambient kind of minute long little masterpiece with everything he did mixing it. And so it seems like even just whether you get the real reflections or whether there's just something magical about hearing the pitch fold back into itself, whether it's in the digital world, so to speak, which is very wonderful and convincing, and it's what we use, or whether it's in real time. Maybe that's a bit of the main thing there of that additive kind of, even if you don't even notice it, it's just underneath the primary sound. One of my favorite albums ever in terms of the sound I'm really inspired by was mixed by the fiddler, and that's Martin Hayes's and Dennis Cahill's The Lonesome Touch. And if you ever have a chance to talk to Martin, he would be great for this. I'd love to. I would love that episode of him talking about exactly how they engineered that, because he had a sound he wanted to get, is what he told me, and he worked with the gear again and again and again until he figured it out. And it's this really cool quality of closeness, space, just this wonderful balance that they managed to achieve on that record.
I think the thing that I was drawn to with that album in particular was that when you listen to the tone of his fiddle, it weirdly sounds like you're right in front of him, but also at the back of the room. It's this, it swirls all around you, and that's a feeling of itself.
Yeah, that's a landmark album for me for just like the sound and the playing and the music making. But they managed to make this like, symphony of nuance and of like everything, counterpoint, expression. Martin's so great because he's coming from his Irish background, but taking everything in music that he listens to, and then it's not a classical technique, but he has all this sensitivity and expression of a great classical violinist, you know, and then they managed to make that happen on the record. It's awesome, truly.
Truly. What's
Well,
next for you? What can we expect in the coming year?
Well, I am right now getting up every morning and writing music for my group and really loving it. And that's the main thing this season, at least. Um, um, you know, a lot of long-term projects were postponed and everything, or put on hold because of the pandemic. So um, that's I would say the main thing. I'm loving recording and teaching and smaller projects here and there. Oh, I'm going to be recording, I think, my looks like my piece that I wrote for orchestra called Stones River, probably next year, and super excited about that. That's just been amazing. Like I really feel like at some point I took these commissions for large scale um, classical groups, a couple of them, and it was quite a challenge. But I'm so psyched with what I learned from doing that, and kind of stretching to that size of a group. And so super excited to get that out. That's a Stones River is a compilation of um, it's a compilation of old American music. So it's like everything from Civil War or earlier, so Civil War to like Revolutionary War, and it's hopefully done in this kind of this seamless segue from one to the next in a way that really I wanted the orchestra and the fiddle to work to each of their strengths without sacrificing what they each do really well. And I was really stoked with how it turned out. So excited for that. Excited for shows again, and to be working on this music that I'm working on right now, or to be working on it with the group sometime soon. Yeah, I would ask you guys, but I'm. Do you get asked that every week?
sometimes no. This is about you, Jeremy. This is about you.
Well, Dane.
Yeah. Um, no. Yeah. I just. Yeah. It's been a real pleasure to be able to catch up with you a little bit and hear from you. It's been way too long.
Yeah,
Since crossing paths.
likewise.
Yeah.
Totally my pleasure, you guys. I love nerding out about this stuff, and it's just like an endlessly fascinating topic. And yeah, so thanks for having me. Real
Yeah.
pleasure.
Well, and to be continued. Hopefully, we'll take the search for the sound on the road down. Eventually, and
Yeah,
we'll get to play some tunes live and nerd out in person.
love it.
Yeah.
Awesome,
Awesome.
guys. Thank you again.
All right.
Thank you for joining us, Jeremy. This has been an amazing episode, and we will absolutely have you on again very soon.
Love it. You guys take care. Be well.
Yeah. Be well.
Thanks for having me. Bye.